in our series of sermons, fist fight, we were talking about speech, attention, thought, and specifically where we left off more or less last time was concerning how little immediate individual attention it takes to operate your ordinary life. And again, I'll point out, as opposed to the continuing condemnation of ordinary people that something is wrong, because people can be more attentive, they can be more conscious, as they like to call it. It sounds evidently more mystical than attentive. Are you attentive or conscious? I don't know. Is this a trick question? Of course, there's your answer, but don't tell him that. He's still waiting for one of those quiz show guys to bring him out a set of luggage. At any rate, rather than being offended and upset by the fact that people can be more conscious, more attentive than they're not, you should in fact be, at least within your own mind, dancing in the streets over the fact that life can go on as it is and people operate at that level. And only look at it as being maybe a backup system, a fallback position, just something to make you feel warm at night if you can't afford an electric blanket, to know that people can be more attentive. But you don't have to. That the fact is, and the proof being, not my theory or somebody else, not all those other people's theory even, the fact is, whatever you're doing, you can be more conscious. You can be more attentive simply by saying, hey, I ought to be more attentive. I know it doesn't sound great. You need to have some kind of chant or some kind of funny zucchini to smoke, or a secret sign or something to make, and you go, I should be more cosmically conscious. It sounds better than saying, or some secret word you've got. But all you've got to do is, at any particular second, as long as you're just middle of the road sane, all you've got to do is say, I should be more attentive, whatever you're doing. Working on your car, cutting the grass, sitting, staring out, watching TV. All you've got to do is say, I should be more attentive, and just then you are. And we were pointing out sort of that you could look at it as being two forms of attention, the primary and the secondary, and what you have done is temporarily brought them into simultaneous, more or less, full force, and they're both operating, which is not necessary is the point. Let me bring it up again, that it's not necessary to operate your ordinary life at that level. It's there. You can do it, but in a sense, in a quite cold-blooded, clinical sense, if you have to see it this way to begin with, the proof of the fact that it's not necessary is that you can't do it. You can't hold it. You can bring it on. You can prove that, yes, it's true. But then what? If you're such a boy genius, if any mystics or somebody was watching this, then if you can do it, what the hell's the big deal? Keep doing it. And then they fall back to, oh, well, wait. There's all kinds of demonic forces or anti-New Age forces or God knows what, of something's fighting to keep me from doing this. We're talking about people that consider wiffle ball part of the Olympics then. To say that, yes, you can do it. And to do it, it takes this big a deal. To say, if you say, I should be more conscious, more alert, you are. Okay. And now you're going to tell me after it's that simple that I cannot do it. But wait, let me explain why. Well, I would, but I got to go. They're holding my luggage backstage. I don't want to miss my prize. You should simply be aware of the fact that although you can be more alert, and those of you that's got any business watching this still, it's got nothing to do with religion. It's got nothing operationally to do with anything that you know about in life. It's simply in you that you can do it, but it's not necessary. Well, the last time we were mentioning about still the terms of the kind of individual attention that it takes and the kind of collective attention. And in a sense, using now individual and collective, that good old kind of equation I made of I plus not I equals everything. Then you can look at the not I as being the collective. It's in no way a pejorative term, and it's no better, no worse, but it's the feeling that the nervous system has, correctly so, operationally, correctively so, that I am in some way, more or less, at some level, I am separate from everybody else. I simply am. I may love my family and etc. But there is a distinction between me and all the not me's. There's something that ends at the great organ of my skin. There is a division. There's nothing to be sad about. So call everything that seems to be out there, just a general running of life, let's call it the collective and the individual, which would be, if they indeed could be absolutely separated. But just as a functional way for us to talk about it, let's say that you can have individual interest, and then there's collective interest. Seems to be society's interest. Not better, not worse, but there seems to be an interest going on out there. Now, speaking of that, it is tied into the matter of attention. And about where we left off, I was just suddenly pulled out an example that I'm going to pull out again. If you are thinking more than you have to, which would be a form of extreme attention, if you're thinking more than you have to at any particular time, individually, which is the only way you can do it, if you're thinking more than you have to, you can then begin to see directly for yourself such things, the example I was using when we left. You can begin to see, for example, the collective's need for sexual mores and prohibitions. Whereas if you can see like this, you see that, there's not a question about it. I'm not sure there's any profit for me to stop and try to explain it. It is necessary collectively. But if you're the type that can see that, then individually you understand that it's impertinent to you. Not right or wrong. It is simply that there are different areas of demand and interest, and the collective has its own. And it may or may not have any direct pertinence to the individual. The saving grace is that if some individual heard this, and I'm sure this kind of terms have been around many, many times before these words have been put together, but ordinary people would look at that as being some kind of license for lasciviousness, if not dangerous alliterations. In other words, you know life has been full, thousands of years, as long as you have recorded history, of people saying, well, screw morality. Let everybody else worry about that. I'm going to do what I want to. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the good old middle class, the bourgeoisie and the hoi polloi of life, that which keeps everything running. The first string team out there playing for life. And so an ordinary person cannot see this the way I'm talking about it. But if you are not limited to the ordinary confinement of the intellectual end of the nervous system, the talking end, what I'm saying is that, for instance, in the whole idea of sexual morality, and where we left it last time, we didn't have time for me to follow up on it, but I was pointing out that in anything the primary, but sexual is the easiest to talk about perhaps, that here you have the collective interest of life, that there's probably nothing in life, there's certainly nothing in the primary areas of life, of just that which would keep the body physical alive. There is no area to compare with sex that is open to being shot at, condemned, tinkered with. Just a constant cry, even today, of, well, we can't let children be exposed to sex and violence is normally it, but if you give the collective their choice of, all right, we can cut out sex or violence, what you want to cut out? They'd cut out sex. Not because they're stupid, but I'm just pointing out there is a constant harping, always has been, on we've got to watch sex. We've got to watch it, but where we were ending last time, and I'm trying to get you to see it in a wider area because I went to the trouble, as always, to try and pick up after ourselves before we even made a mess. Well, because the ordinary mind wants to go, wait a minute, we're about to make a mess. From one view, having nothing whatsoever to do with morality is where we're starting last time, because you recall I was doing this gesture, and that's how you can tell we're back where we started. I don't want to confuse you that you think your set went out, because I was doing it with my right hand, but variety is the spice of life, if not TV. It's from one view you could say, what area? If I was going to pick out what area to start picking on in human behavior, if I was going to pick out the most ridiculous, probably the most potentially dangerous area to pick on, what would it be? In a sense, sex, because you thought, wait a minute, if I get everybody all upset about sex and the whole world quit screwing, we're all done for. Of course, that's an ordinary person, because ordinary people are the ones who always say, well, my greatest concern in life is the coming generations. Well, they have a speechwriter from whom they cannot escape. So they have to say that. Well, it's part of the collective's need to say that. Yes, I care very little about my own self. I worry about the future of my children, which I assure you that is not the primary nervous system of any human talking. If you want to see the primary nervous human system of most at the primary level, look at the other creatures. You know, when the ship goes down, you do not see beavers and minks and lions hollering, "Get the children! Get the children!" Yeah, they step on them getting out of there. That's the nature of life. But what I was going to, we left off, and I was trying to pick it up for you to see that, as you should know anyway, it was not an attack on morality or sex or anything. It just, to pick on sex, you could start picking on food. Of course, that does happen indirectly. We're all concerned about weight and diet and kosher foods and non-religious items that certain people eat, which is, again, playing around with the edges of danger, because it's beginning to say, wait a minute, we have got to stop our children from seeing people eat in the movies. You know, because you think, well, that's ridiculous. If we start getting children upset, we'd have people suffering from some kind of terminal, what do they call it, psychological nirvana neurosis. Extra Amtrak's, whatever it is. You would have the little nippers, you'd have all of humanity going, ooh, in the same way that some people say they're repelled by some of the great poets that used to say things like, I won't try to quote any of them, especially because since some of you told me that Milton was still alive, and I don't have to fight that man anymore. But some of the great poets used to say things like, they could look upon all of life and stand it except thinking about having to, engage in sex. So what if you had little people now going, ooh, and they had that kind of poetic, if not literal, repulsion to eating, which is ridiculous. You're not going to have some citizen council, unless perhaps it was from Mississippi or New Jersey, to say what we've got to do on children's TV is stamp out sex, violence, and people eating. You think, wait a minute. The first two I can go along with, but you can't get children upset about eating. I mean, I've got hard enough time now getting the little darling to eat his food. You know. Where we were, as I was pointing out, from one view, it is just folly. I don't know what else to call it. Well, I do, but it would just be an obscene adjective on top of folly. To be concerned over fucking, we've got to watch that. What do you mean you got to watch it? You got to do it to stay alive, to keep everything going. What do you mean you got to watch it? But now, see, this means we're back to where we started. Can you see that rather than me having to apologize or for you or try to explain to yourself, well, wait a minute, are we talking about morality or are we trying to weasel our way out? There are two needs going on. Always. There's a collective need of life and an individual need. And as a rule, another distinction, if you don't have to see it, between whatever the revolutionist would be, whatever we mean by it, would be somebody who, in a real sense, could look after their individual interests. But that doesn't mean that they're smarter or better, because the collective interest is the proper interest of almost everybody. Almost everybody on this planet at any given time. It's not that they're wrong. But if you are, let's go ahead and call it a revolutionist, since I keep saying it and none of us know what it means anymore. Trying to make you feel good. If you could see that there is a distinction, that there is a collective need out there, it goes on, and you certainly, if you can see all of this now, of course you're out of the ordinary, but if you can see that, you certainly have not one complaint with what's going on. No, we're back to one that some of you laughed at once, like you understood it. It's like being able to holler, commercials for everyone, PBS for me. It's like what goes on in life, I got no complaint about, as long as I don't have to put up with it, as long as I'm not confined to it here. But you can see that there's a collective need out there, without any doubt, and you should be able to see it without me stooping so low as to rub mud in your wounds. That there has to be out there, with life in general, the collective, there has to be sexual morality. There has to be. It is just one of the benchmarks of civilization. You cannot, if you were some kind of imagined libertine yourself, just some ordinary rebel out in life, some hothead, and you suddenly had the power, and you thought, well, the greatest thing that your biggest hobby in life was sex, and you thought, boy, I can't stand, I look around at my parents and all these old people and everybody's so uptight about sex, and you suddenly had the power to do away with it, surely you get just a glimpse. Forget Midas going around touching people, patting them his kids on the head, and they turned into gold. Now, that man was slow walking compared to the damage you'd do. People would be simply uncivilized again. You could not turn collectively. You could not turn sex loose again. Even though you have got to have it for the race to continue, for life to have man to work through. But it has to have certain kinds of restraints, or people would simply be killing themselves more with sex now than the fist fights and beer joints would indicate. Out there is a collective demand, an absolute demand for sexual morality, but there is a divergence. If everybody can, once you can see that, not that it necessarily change your behavior, but the point is you understand that individually it's not the same thing. The two needs cannot actually be separated, but they are diverse enough that if you can see it, you can see that they're separate. You can see that an individual's interest, if he can see his individual interest, is not necessarily confined to that which is the collective interest, although you've still got no complaint against the collective interest, contraire. If you saw the collective interest start falling apart, like sexual morality, and it went far enough, I just want to be sure you got the point, even though that you understood that that's got no pertinence to me individually, if it went far enough, and you're still living in the midst of civilization, you might get out there with the sound of the rest of them. You know, bring back morality. We got to watch it. Just because, looking after your own interest, not theirs, your own interest. Because if it collapses out there, how shall I put this? You got nowhere to go. If the collective begins to collapse, you can't go, well, I'm too smart for that. I'm a hermit. I know. But if those kind of walls begin to fall, nobody is immune. There is no way to get away from it. Under ordinary circumstances, those who think what the crowd, what the collective is thinking, are thinking correctly. And what they're thinking, what the collective is thinking, is always just what will get them by. That is the level of attention. That is the level of consciousness, as it's called. And you can see, if you can see that just thinking just as much as you have to, just being just as attentive as required by whatever you're doing, helps maintain and support the collective's needs. Withal, if you do think more than that, then you would begin to see that the collective's needs are not necessarily those directly pertinent to you. I assume that got too complicated, or more people should have either chuckled or left. The ordinary level, I think they like to call it, of consciousness, the ordinary level of attentiveness, serves a very specific purpose. Although, still keeping in mind, although ordinary people can make themselves more conscious for a second. They can be more attentive just by saying, I should be more attentive. Rather than falling into the good old one of that which can be, should be, rather than falling into that, understand that at the collective level, being just as attentive is absolutely demanded. Being just as conscious, giving just as much alertness to what you're doing to get you by, serves a specific purpose of it operating there. And the purpose being that helps maintain the collective's need. On the other hand, or as opposed to, if I still got it too convoluted, that if there isn't some spasmodic person here and there, sometimes known as a revolutionist, that can think for no reason, you don't have to, can think about what's going on, be more alert to what's going on for no reason. Well, he's got his own reason, but God knows what it is. It's not the collective reason, because we've already proven. I've taken their argument that you can be more conscious, more alert, and people are not. So you don't have to be. That's obvious. But if somebody individually does do it, what it does show is that the collective needs, that is, that what everybody else is thinking, although it's right out there, that is, hey, commercials for everybody. Keep the networks going. Because the networks going and the commerce going is what helps pay for non-commercial television that you can watch. Symbolically speaking, of course. Commercial TV for everyone, PBS for me. That's the point. Hey, sexual morality for everyone. Oh, couldn't agree with you more. Whatever they're saying. We have got to have these kinds of prohibitions, these kinds of brakes on human behavior. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Whether you do it literally or not, you're in favor of it. You're in favor of it so that you don't have to put up with it. Because that helps pay for your PBS. The collective needs help make your individual interest possible. Because if they're not making a profit, if the commercial networks are not making a profit, that means that the economy is probably not the level that the government's going to continue to fund PBS. Do you follow? It's not that you're in favor of commercials. It's not that you think the other people are too dumb to watch PBS. Don't get hung up. This is symbolic. It's not even metaphorical. It's symbolic. But you're saying, oh, hey, don't badmouth commercial television to me. Don't tell me they have too many commercials. This country's got to grow. We got to have profit. And if you're an individual, whether you said that overtly or not, what you're saying is, I want things to go well out there. I want the collective to prosper, because by them prospering, I don't have to put up with it. By the economy flourishing in such a manner that advertising revenues are up, and they can put on more commercials. Not less, more commercials. I'm in favor of it, because it's only through that way that they're going to use some of the tax money, some of the revenues to help fund non-commercial television. Under routine conditions, any unnecessary thought that an individual might have about his individual interests, which all of it would be unnecessary because it's not required, but any that a person might do, just to make a further verbal sketch of it, could be considered dangerous. Speaking very figuratively, because not enough of it occurs, but it could be if the collective knew it, if life knew that there were too many individuals beginning to think more than they had to individually about their own possible individual interest, life could look upon it as being potentially dangerous. Because what that would do is thinking more than you have to, being more attentive to whatever you're doing, to giving it more attention, thinking more about it than you have to. The distinct danger is it begins to reveal the divergent needs and interests of the two collective and individual realms. Because that's exactly what it will do. Whether if you did it on your own, it's not necessarily you'd come up with that term, because the description doesn't mean duck do unless it's on your own roof. But that is what it is. That is what all the great forms written down and remembered about great cosmic experiences and mystical insights and new levels of some kind of constant awareness, all the great dreamed of philosophical mystical states is that. To understand that the equation I plus not I is unfathomable, inescapable, meaningless. The fish cannot avoid the water. The fish is not the water. Try and tell a fish that. Try and let a fish tell the water that. You understand. The danger would be, since it can't happen, the danger would be that thinking about your collective activity, that is, what you do in life, just what you ordinarily do, thinking about it more than you have to, begins to show that, hey, maybe, hey, I got no interest in this. Now, I don't know. Of course, if we had some ordinary people listening to this, there'd be plenty of people would say, where's my old beret? I'll grow my goatee back. How is you made Molotov cocktails? Can you do it with this cheap gas they got now? 87 octane. it's just stonewall time to verbally describe it to ordinary people, which I'm not trying to do, but I just don't, trying to give you every leeway not to fall into any ordinary crack. It's not to look upon life in any way and condemn it, which is, we're not going to get into it tonight, but the Kairos I let show up a couple of times that point out that all runaway slaves speak ill of their masters except for revolutionists. That is tied, to get you started, to what I'm pointing out right now, because the pseudo-rebels in life, those that simply want to stick out their tongue, they're not part of the mainstream and they're not part of life's, they're useless anomalies. Well, they're not useless, I shouldn't say that. Meaningless. They're the ones that would hear something like this, those kind of minds, and say, hey, you're right. Boy, I cannot stand middle-class morality. Boy, what a bunch of uptight prune brains. You know, we should all be sexually open. We should all, you know, be taking all the drugs we want to, not, of course, squash. We should all be doing whatever we want to. You're right, boy. We should be revolutionists. That's not dangerous. That's why life allows that. It's not dangerous. It's somebody dancing blindfolded with life, and they're kicked and stepped on. And they go, hey, I'm being kicked and stepped on. And their friends are, I think as the holy books used to say, sorely amazed at their deep insight. I cut my finger and I'm bleeding. Would you like to start some kind of cult? I'll be your first follower, a man with that kind of deep insight. The needs, the collective needs of life, are not open to any censure except for those who are out there playing meaningless rebel games. It's not even worth talking about, but I'm just trying to get you to see there is a distinction, because as always, what we're talking about is reflected in life. There are people who would do it, or people that could hear this by some accident and go, hey, I couldn't agree with you more. When the fact is, if they had any suspicion, they couldn't agree with it less, is the point. They'd be the kind of ones that go, hey, if I had more time, it didn't cost anything, I'd come join up. And if there's something to join up, then they'd be the first ones, trust me, that I'd say, I'm sorry, the membership's full. The very ones that would first show up and say, wait a minute, this is exactly what I believe. Where do I sign? We'd have to say, well, we're completely out of pens. And they'd be the first ones to go, wait a minute, no, I hear all this. I couldn't agree with you more. And the truth is, they couldn't agree with it less. No. The danger that I was saying, which couldn't happen, but that life would infer, even the collective would infer, if it got big enough and if they could see it, was that an individual, if he thinks more than he had to, would see that the collective needs, the demands to keep life going, may or may not have any particular pertinence to me. I may not be interested in it. I might, but it will simply be at the primary level. That is the kind of dream, or that's one description I suggest to you, of the kind of old dreams of people believing they're captive by life, or your four caveman parents believing they're captive of evil spirits and demonic possessions, and nowadays more so, I'm captive of traumatic experiences, unconscious experiences in my life. I am captive by the low level of consciousness of humanity. Whatever it is, they believe that they are a slave. And they hear something like this, and I don't keep referring to this as the only thing. They can hear other things and think, wait a minute, that's a chance to run away. That's what I'm after, is freedom. But it never gets past the level of, I want freedom to be able to go up to a priest and go, or I want freedom to go to bed with my neighbor's wife and my neighbor say, hey, no problem. It's meaningless. But the danger would be, if it really happened, for somebody to understand, this is where the brick wall, this is where the crack is. There is validity to that, but not operationally, not physically. Is why it would only be a revolutionist who could run away if there is some kind of freedom. And since Kairos made up that thing about only that all runaway slaves speak ill of their masters except for the revolutionists. Everybody else that would dream that I'm captive of something, and everybody does, religious or otherwise. Yes, something's holding me back. Maybe it's just my own timidity. Maybe it's my own fear. Maybe it's my own humility. No. But I am being held back. There's things I want to do, and something's holding me back. If they get the appearance, if they have the feeling that they got away, they always speak ill of what they consider their master. You know that. Who wants to hear a reformed alcoholic as soon as somebody mentions something about booze or anything and their eyes light up? Grab your car keys. Run for your life. Turn on commercial television because you know what's coming. And a man says, yes, I drink a fifth of Jack Daniels every day. And let's say that you have an appreciation of Jack Daniels, that you're civilized enough. But let's say that you're temporarily dumb enough to go, really? I love Jack Daniels. Do you expect that man's going to say anything other than what I've already inferred? Do you think he in any way is going to speak well of his past captor? Nobody curses their demons as bad as a reformed whatever. Everybody who believes even that they got away from something, they will speak ill. It would only be a revolutionist. Of course, there's a trick in that. If you know what you're doing, who but an idiot is going to move from 317 4th Street to 417 3rd Street and then spend the rest of their life every time somebody brings up 4th Street, go, oh, wait a minute. Oh, God, let me tell you. Oh, I lived over there for 15 years. Let me tell you, to spend their life here and even overtly bad-mouthing their old address. Oh, God, that almost killed me living there. Same thing. Now, of course, all they're saying is, it almost killed me living at that level of attention. But now I'm freed from it. And they're not. They're freed from some kind of behavior that was reflected by it. I no longer drink. Let me tell you all about it. Gee, I didn't think you ever would. I used to run around cheating my wife, but now I saw the light. Let's see, you're 55 now, right? Well, yeah, but that doesn't have anything to do with it. Well, we're running out of tape, but I simply leave it with the fact that you can see it, the individual. And since this is not for great public consumption, it would have to be an individual that would make anything out of this and be able to use it. But there are two useful distinctions between the collective. And I've picked out surely two of the great easy examples, such as commercial entertainment as opposed to otherwise. And it's not just TV, you understand. It's if your city is supporting an opera. So you like opera. And you walk past places where there are clubs and people drunk and out there and listening to God knows what. That terrible teenage kind of music. As soon they don't come out there and piss on your foot or bang into your car, in a real sense, you should be in favor of it. Right next door to the local opera house. Because the kind of taxes the municipality is whipping on the beer and the wine and dancing, a lot of them still got dancing tax. Is that help support? I mean, if your tax is going in there anyway, you're indirectly paying for it. And you do understand we're not talking about economics or, in fact, showbiz or Verdi as opposed to Van Halen. But you should be in favor. Boy, I hope they drink it up, because the more they drink, the more taxes the county or the city collects, and the more chance there is that some of that funds are going into the opera, which never makes a profit, so they say, which is another great story. But no, high-class entertainment never turns a profit. That's why we have to tax you people. At any rate, you should be in favor of it. In the same way that you should be in favor, once you see it, of the collective need out there for sexual standards. I mean strict. I mean, there are things we can't allow. And exaggerating this is not the way it is, but internally, an individual can see that. It's just foolish. It just got no pertinence. That doesn't mean that you might not act that way anyway, because it does reflect some need in life. So just by saying that, if you saw, to put it real crudely, are we still on tape at all? To put it real crudely, if you looked at sexual morality and thought, well, it's foolishness. I mean, it's absolutely foolishness, and it has no pertinence to me. It doesn't even affect me. I see it for what it is. That doesn't mean that you might act that much differently from the morality of that collective area. But you would understand that the need for it collectively is not my need. We'll pick it up next time, unless they come along with a scooper and do it before we get back. Good night. Ciao.